All right, so today we're taking a deep insight into ISO 14064. Now, I know that doesn't sound as exciting as, say, exploring a shipwreck, but it's vastly more important for our world today. This standard is the rulebook for how organizations measure and report their greenhouse gas emissions, their carbon footprint. It's about figuring out who is contributing what to climate change. The reason a standard like this is so crucial is that it gets everyone on the same page. Imagine if every organization just used their own methods to measure emissions. It would be total chaos. Trying to compare anything would be impossible, like putting together a puzzle where all the pieces are from different boxes. This standard gives us a shared system, a common framework, so we can actually see the big picture and track progress. You can't address a global problem without a global way to measure it. It's about moving beyond individual efforts and getting everyone working together, which is exactly what we need to tackle something as complex as climate change. So, where do we even begin? The standard is incredibly comprehensive, but to really understand it, let's start with its core goal and the guiding principles that shape everything else. The main goal, laid out in Section 4, is to provide a consistent framework for quantifying and reporting greenhouse gas emissions and removals. It's all about giving organizations a reliable method to track their impact and make informed decisions. This isn't just about collecting data. It's about empowering organizations to drive real change and actually reduce their emissions. To ensure this happens effectively, the standard is built on 7 key principles found in Section 5: relevance, completeness, consistency, accuracy, transparency, conservatism, and continuous improvement. Relevance is straightforward. Completeness means an organization's inventory must include all significant sources of emissions and removals within its defined boundaries. No cutting corners. Transparency goes hand in hand with that, requiring openness about how data was gathered and what methods were used to build trust. Consistency and accuracy ensure that if you measure something one way this year, you measure it the same way next year, and that the data reflects actual emissions. Conservatism is a bit more philosophical. It means being cautious, not overestimating your reductions or underestimating your emissions. No fudging the numbers. And finally, continuous improvement means the work never ends. Organizations must always be reviewing their processes and looking for ways to refine their carbon accounting. These principles are woven throughout the entire standard, guiding every step. So, how does this work in practice? The very first step, laid out in Section 6, is defining boundaries. This is super important for making sure the inventory is accurate and complete. We're essentially drawing lines in the carbon sand, and there are 2 main types: the organizational boundary and the operational boundary. The organizational boundary defines which parts of an organization, which entities and operations are included. For a big company with subsidiaries and investments, this is determined using 3 criteria: equity share, financial control, and operational control. If a company has a controlling interest based on any of these, that entity's emissions are included. It's not just about physical location, it's about influence and taking responsibility for the impact of your investments. Once that's set, you move to the operational boundary. This zooms in on the specific activities that generate emissions, covering all owned or controlled sources. We're talking about everything from fuel combustion for heating buildings to industrial processes to fugitive emissions and even activities related to land use and forestry. It's a truly comprehensive view of how the organization interacts with the atmosphere. Okay, we've drawn our boundaries. Now, how do we actually measure the emissions? That's where Section 7 comes in, providing the framework for calculation. First, you have to meticulously identify all relevant sources and sinks. Every boiler, company vehicle, chemical reaction, and even agricultural practices. Then you select the right quantification method. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It could be direct measurement or calculations using emission factors depending on the source and available data. This brings us to a fascinating point: biogenic emissions. These are tied to biological processes, mostly from land use and forestry. We're talking about the carbon cycling through ecosystems. The standard is very specific here, differentiating between emissions caused by humans versus those from natural events. For example, planting a forest is a human-caused removal, while a wildfire is a natural emission. We need to isolate that human signal from the natural background noise to get a clear picture of how our actions from deforestation to reforestation are impacting the global carbon flow. But we've only scratched the surface. We also need to look at indirect emissions, especially those tied to using electricity, which can be a huge hidden chunk of an organization's footprint. It's easy to forget that flipping a switch has an impact, but it all comes down to where that electricity is generated. Section 7.4 gives us two ways to account for this: the location-based approach and the market-based approach. The location-based approach is what it sounds like. It uses an average emission factor for the electricity grid in the specific location where the power is used. So if your grid is mainly coal-powered, your emissions are higher. The market-based approach is more specific. It allows an organization to account for the actual source of their electricity through contractual instruments, like renewable energy certificates. If a company buys power from a specific wind farm, they can claim those lower emissions, even if they're not directly connected to it. It's like they're choosing their own electricity adventure and getting credit for their green choices. This reflects the growing importance of renewable energy markets in driving a cleaner future. Of course, measuring is half the battle. Section 8 focuses on mitigation, quantifying and reporting on emissions reductions. The standard encourages organizations to implement GHG reduction initiatives, which can be anything from installing solar panels and switching to electric vehicles to investing in carbon capture. To make these efforts strategic, it's vital to set specific GHG emission reduction targets, like reducing emissions by a certain percentage by a certain date. It's like setting a personal best in the carbon reduction race. To ensure all this is done fairly, the standard requires robust information management procedures. This means training staff, having clear data collection protocols, conducting internal audits to find weaknesses, and even assessing uncertainty in the data. It's all about putting checks and balances in place. An internal audit acts like a fresh set of eyes, while technical reviews dive into the nitty-gritty to make sure the calculations are sound. This creates a transparent audit trail with no shady accounting allowed. All of this data and analysis would be pointless if it just sat in a file cabinet. This brings us to the final and arguably most important step: reporting. Section 9 is all about creating clear, credible, and impactful GHG reports. Reporting is what connects the data to real action. A good GHG report is highly structured. It starts with the basics: identifying the organization, the reporting period, and the boundaries. Then comes the meat, the emissions data itself, broken down by DAS type, source, and activity. This creates a carbon map, highlighting the areas for improvement. The report must be transparent about how indirect electricity emissions were handled and must explicitly state that it was prepared in accordance with the ISO standard, a stamp of approval. If the inventory has been independently verified, that adds another layer of credibility, like a seal of approval from the carbon accounting experts. Beyond the essentials, a great report tells a story. It provides context on energy use, discusses mitigation efforts, and details progress towards targets. It becomes a powerful communication tool, a kind of sustainability resume, showcasing a commitment to a low-carbon future. And at the end of the video, that's what this is all about. This deep insight into ISO 14064 has taken us from boundaries and quantification to mitigation and reporting. It's empowering to know there's a robust global framework guiding organizations to a more sustainable path. It's about everyone speaking the same language, turning awareness into action. This standardized approach gives me hope that we can not only measure our impact, but truly reduce it.